Okay, Programming 11, here's another extension lesson where we're going to go a bit beyond what the project requires. If you're feeling pretty confident about things like functions and how we're doing the buttons, you'll remember that we made a tactile button function that chooses whether or not we make the button highlight itself when we mouse over. But we can go one step further and we can make a whole function just to draw that button. And you'll see that I'm using it right here. I don't know. Here we go. Zoom in. I called it tactile button. And oh, I don't know how to select it on Mac. Apparently my mouse is crazy. But anyways, here's that tactile button function. And I've created it so that it can, draw buttons. I just have to tell it where to put the button and what icon to use and what it's supposed to do. So here's the story behind that. So we have a circle icon. This is an image, by the way, and it's just a transparent image. I think I drew it. Oh, yeah, over here in this Photopea program. Oh, I don't know what I've done now. Here we go. I guess we're good. So we got our circle icon, or I can send it like whatever image I want to send it, and it will draw that on top. I tell it the coordinates and the size, just like a rect, and I also tell it sort of what button is supposed to be activated so that it can be highlighted as a sort of on-off button. These, by the way, these are not built in. I've programmed them in. They're just nicknames for numbers, really. I have a final variable because I don't want to accidentally change it during my project. Final is like a lock that turns off the ability to change this variable. I don't want circle tool to change. It's really just 0, and squiggle tool is just 1, and I'll just make new names for these. But it makes for much more readable code. If you said 0 here instead of squiggle tool and 1 here instead of circle tool, you might remember, but over time you might start to forget which one's 0, which one's 1. And certainly other people who are looking at this, like myself, would find it confusing to look at and be like, oh yeah, 0 means squiggle tool. So I've just given them names so that I understand, exactly what's going on, and you can understand what's going on as well. So anyways, the buttons themselves, back to the tactile buttons, check it out. They simply take an image and some coordinates and widths and heights, and then an int that's going to represent which tool it is. And then I am basically just drawing, whether or not they are going to be highlighted. So I check to see if the button is touching the mouse. We'll get back to this. This is a Boolean function. I'll come back to that in a minute. We have our stroke that's being drawn, so I choose to draw a red stroke if the mouse is touching the button. Otherwise, I draw a white stroke. And then this is about checking to see if the current tool that's selected is this tool. If we've currently selected this tool, then I want to fill with red. Otherwise, I fill with black. So this is all my, this here is all about the tactile nature of the button, and this is sort of the on-off display of the button. These are sort of two different separate things. This code here is showing us if the mouse is moving over by highlighting the stroke, and this code here determines what color to fill the button with based on whether we've selected this tool or not. And the tool knows which tool it is because we've set that as a parameter, and we can check to see if the current tool is the same. Last but not least, I just draw the rectangle and the image being the icon, and that works pretty smoothly to just draw that lovely button. You'll notice there is a button is touching mouse function. It's a Boolean function, so this might be new for you. A Boolean function basically answers a question, yes or no, is this happening? True or false, is this happening? And I've put the whole mouse logic, like checking to see if the mouse is within a rectangle. And I've just put that kind of long statement inside of this function, so I can just say button is touching mouse. And I don't have to code this over and over again. You might wonder, well, why not? It's not that different. Like if I just copied and pasted this and replaced sort of this, it wouldn't be much longer. But it's not about longer. It's just less error prone. This also reads like English. If button is touching mouse is literally English, whereas you put a bunch of math in there and it's harder to see the mistake if you make it. I don't have to type in the mouse x less than, mouse x greater than, all that kind of code, which is kind of easy to make a mistake on. Now I can just refer to that code with sending the information about the button. So this is a Boolean function. You can stick it into an if statement instead of a void function because Boolean functions return an answer. That's why we include the word return here. So basically, the Boolean functions can be embedded into other things like if statements. So literally, this function gets called and answers the question, is the button touching the mouse? So if that's kind of too annoying or fancy for you or whatever the word is, you can just put that inside of the if statement. Nothing's changed, but you can also give that a name and call that instead, which I think is nice and clean. And then, of course, when you click on these buttons, that's going to be handled somewhere else. Ultimately, this would be nice to put into a class, but we haven't done classes yet. But, a class wouldn't look all that much different than these things. You'd have some of the stuff in the constructor, and you'd have some of these in the various behavior functions of the class, but it's not too different. So anyways, here is the mouse released. So basically, the only other thing I need to know is, hey, if the button is touching a particular, button, the mouse is touching a particular button, then I can just set the circle tool to the current tool, or the squiggle tool to the current tool. This is in the mouse release function. This is really the clicking of the button that I'm making, and this is kind of hard coded in here. And you might want to be like, oh, but couldn't we make this a little more dry? And yeah, we probably could. I think ultimately classes is what I would use. You'll get minimal gains improving upon this design without classes, I think, and this is probably about as good as we need to do for now. And we'll get into classes later on. So that's basically how those buttons work. I hope you found that interesting and useful, and feel free to use this technique. It's not far off from what we're doing with the rest of the class, but it's a little bit more advanced, a little bit fancier way of doing things. All right, folks, have yourselves a good day. Take care.